Genesis chapter 7, verse 7. God has been speaking to Noah saying, the flood is coming. Get your family, get the animals, either in sevens or twos, depending on whether they're clean or unclean. Get on the ark because the waters are coming, and now we're going to see them actually fulfill that and get on the boats. Ezelthen de Noe, ke huioi autu, ke hugune autu, ke hai or he gunaikis ton huion autu, met autu, eistain kibotan, dia tahudor to katakluzmu. We'll begin with this simple verb here, ezelthen. That's just a third singular aorist active indicative from eis erchomai. Notice that it is third singular, and the subject here is Noah. He continues to be the kind of main guy, if you will, the guy that God is working through. He's representing his family, and so technically he's going to enter the boat, but he's going to be joined by others. First off, we have the sons. Now, they were named in 5:32, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And it's interesting they come first, most likely because they're going to be the heirs of the covenantal promises and curses, actually, in chapter 9. Then he mentions his wife, the Hegune there, and then the Gunaikis, that is the wives of his sons. And so if you do the math, you've got Noah as one, wife as two, 3 sons, and 3 wives. So the total here is 8. Hold that thought. But they're going to go with him. They're under his protection, under his headship, into the kibotan, the kibotas there, that is the ark. So once again, you see the ace plus the ace. In Greek, it's not really redundant. It feels that way in English. Now, why do they go into the ark? Dia plus the accusative hudor here. So this would be because of or on account of the water. And it's the water of the katakluzmas, that is the flood. So on account of that, they go into the ark. Now, I want to jump to 2 Peter 2:5 here. And we've seen echoes of the Noah narrative in 1 Peter. We've also seen it in Hebrews. Here's another little summary in 2 Peter. So we read this: He, that is God, didn't spare the ancient world, but protected Noah. So there we have your Noah here. And what's interesting is that Peter says that he was a preacher of righteousness, a kerux of righteousness. Now, in prior verses, specifically 7:1, which we connected to Hebrews 11, we saw this righteousness word. But Peter calls him a herald, a preacher of righteousness, and 7 others. Now, technically, in Greek, it says Noah was the 8th. And so here, some translations will say, well, really, it's Noah plus 7 others. That's what they're getting at. We numbered them on earlier in this video. So Peter's done the math. When he brought the flood, that is the katakluzmas, on the world of the ungodly. So the question is this: what does Peter mean by calling Noah a preacher of righteousness? Here's the issue. In Genesis 6, God is speaking to Noah. It says, hey, a flood's coming. All mankind is bad. Indeed, it is the world of the ungodly. So that's kind of a Genesis 6 frame of reference. Then he gives Noah all of the instructions about how to build the ark and all of its dimensions and so forth. Then in chapter 7, he says, okay, bring the animals in, bring your family in. And then all of a sudden the flood happens, right? We're now in the flood time frame. So when was he preaching? It's an interesting narrative gap in the Genesis 6 and 7 narrative, if you will. There's not really any clear evidence of what exactly Noah is doing behind the scenes, because it took him a long time, actually, to build the ark. Presumably, he is warning people in that time frame. It's just that Genesis 6 and 7 is silent on that. So Peter's picking up on either an inference that he's making about what Noah is doing in terms of preaching righteousness to everyone around him while he's building the ark, or perhaps he's tapping into a Jewish tradition that had already done that, if you will, had already filled in the narrative gaps. And on that front, I want to introduce some of the evidence for that. So in my book called Non-Canonical Influences on the New Testament, which came out in 2025, I get into at great length these kinds of things, both on the Greek side of the equation and the Jewish side of the equation. And this is one of the passages in 2 Peter that I cover. And so what I put on screen here are just a few examples from Jewish writers, either roughly around the time of the writing of the New Testament in the case of Josephus, or afterwards in the case of the Talmud and some other rabbinic writings. There are some others that I haven't included. Now, I want to be clear, I'm not saying that Peter is directly using any of these sources. All I'm simply trying to show, or what I try to show in the book, is that it's plausible that some of the scribes and scholars of the intertestamental period, from the writing of the Old Testament to the coming of the New Testament and like the penning of 2 Peter, had already developed this idea that Noah must have been preaching while he's building the ark, warning those around him. And so here are a few examples. Josephus says this: Noah here was unable to endure their practices, all these evil people around him. He was offended by their conduct, so he tried to persuade them to change their thoughts for something better. They wouldn't give in, and so he kind of gives up, so he departed from that land. So he was a preacher of righteousness, but again, only his family was indeed saved. There's a few others from that time period, but we'll skip ahead to the Babylonian Talmud, where they say this: Noah, the righteous one. So there's that word that we also find in 2 Peter. He rebuked them, saying, repent. He's a preacher of righteousness. For if not, the Holy One will bring a flood upon you. And then even much later in the Pirkei Rabbi Eleazar, Noah said to them, turn from your evil ways and evil deeds so that he will not bring upon you the waters of the flood. So these are just three examples of a few others depicting Noah as this herald of, hey, repent, flood is coming. And it's possible, at least, that perhaps Peter is aware of that exegetical tradition, not necessarily drawing on any of these, of course, because these largely post-date 2 Peter, depending on your dating of Peter's writings. But there was already this instinct that, even though it's not expressly stated in Genesis 6 or 7 that he's heralding things, he was indeed likely doing that. So, interesting stuff. Hopefully you found that fun. And now they're on the boats, ready for the rains.